Welcome to the 14th key Bible reading suggested by God, and that is who I understand can be called the I am that Moses heard from, and another title is Self-Existent One. And we're going to learn about how David spares Saul's life, and this takes place in a place called En Gedi, and on the iBibleMaps.com, when you put in Saul and David and En Gedi, it says wild goat of En Gedi, and it's near the Dead Sea, so we can see the Mediterranean Sea on this map too. When we look at En Gedi on Wikipedia, we can see that there's some beautiful pictures of these dry areas, rocky areas next to the Dead Sea, and one of the pictures is called the David Falls. It's showing little waterfalls. Interesting, named after David, so it ties into this story that there is something named David at that site. And then another picture is called the Window of Dry Fall, overlooking En Gedi and the Dead Sea. So that's on Wikipedia. And as I've said in other shows, go back to the beginning if you're coming in on this show, and we are guided to listen to these Bible readings in the order given. And I got that when I asked about the fires in California, especially right after the fire in Santa Barbara, the wildfire. I asked if that was God's wrath, and the listener of God heard no, and then he heard do this series of readings and do them in the order given. So you can find the series on YouTube.com, and then go to ECO Peace PEACE Vision VISION, and then go to playlists, and that's how you'll find the key Bible reading series. So we're on 1 Samuel chapter 24. David has the chance to spare Saul's life twice, and even though David had been anointed, they put oil on the forehead as the chosen one that God anointed to be king, but Saul is still king, and Samuel is very respectful to not harm Father God or self-existent one's other anointed king. So self-existent one had chosen Saul, and Saul is still alive, so David is very careful to not harm Saul, even though Saul is really trying to kill him for a number of years. Okay, so David spares Saul's life, and I am reading from NASB, which stands for New American Standard Bible. So the Old Testament is directly from the Hebrew to English, and in the New Testament, with this version of the Bible, is from Greek to English, because the gospel of Jesus was spread in Greek. So, okay, so verse 1 of this chapter. Now when Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, saying, Behold, David is in the wilderness of En Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to seek David and his men in front of the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds on the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the inner recesses of the cave. The men of David said to him, Behold, this is the day of which the Lord said to you, that's Lord in capital letters, which in the actual Hebrew text would be Y. In the ancient Hebrew, it would be YHVH, or Yod-He-Vah-He, or Jehovah. And in the Babylonian exile, it got changed to YHWH, but I personally feel the ancient Hebrew makes a little more sense, and I believe those letters actually translate closer to he exists, or self-existent one. So okay, so the men of David said to him, "Behold, this is the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I am about to give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it seems good to you." Then David arose and cut off the edge of Saul's robe secretly. It came about afterward that David's conscience bothered him because he had cut off the edge of Saul's robe. So he said to his men, "Far be it from me, because of the Lord, that I should do this thing to my Lord." I want to point out it's Lord with small letters. So when he said that I should do this thing to my Lord, he's acknowledging that King Saul is still his king, even though he was anointed king, because Saul is still in office. That self-existent one, Father God, hasn't taken Saul out of office by having him die or some other official way. That he's just being very honoring the hierarchy. And so anyway, these are maybe tests of character. We are guided to look at this, that self-existent one really likes the whole book of 1 Samuel. So just we can notice that David is, even though he's being, about to be killed, always Saul is always out to get him, David has the good character to honor authority and honor self-existent one. We can say Jehovah's authority, and the timing, it's not his time yet to be king. So verse 5, it came about afterward that David's conscience bothered him because he had cut off the edge of Saul's robe. Verse 6, so he said to his men, "Far be it from me, because of the Lord, that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, since he is the Lord's anointed." David persuaded his men with these words and did not allow them to rise up against Saul. And Saul arose, left the cave, and went on his way. Now afterward, David arose and went out of the cave and called after Saul, saying, "My lord the king." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the ground and prostrated himself. That means like his whole backside was face up. He was on his stomach, it sounds like. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men, saying, 'Behold, David seeks to harm you'? Behold, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord hath given you into my hand in the cave, and some said to kill you. But my eye had pity on you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. Now, my father, see the edge of your robe in my hand." For I just want to point out that he was his father-in-law, so it was like his father. "Indeed, see the edge of your robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the edge of your robe and did not kill you. Know and perceive that there is no evil or rebellion in my hands, and I have not sinned against you, though you are lying in wait for my life to take it. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge me on you. But my hand shall not be against you, as the proverb of the ancients says, 'Out of the wicked comes forth wickedness, but my hand shall not be against you. After whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog? A single flea? The Lord therefore be judge, and decide between you and me, and he may see and plead my cause, and deliver me from your hand." When David had finished speaking these words to Saul, Saul said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" Then Saul lifted up his voice and wept. He said to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have dealt well with me, while I have dealt wickedly with you. You have declared today that you have done good to me, and the Lord delivered me into your hand, yet you did not kill me. For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safely? May the Lord therefore reward you with good in return for what you have done to me this day. Now behold, I know that you will surely be king, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hand. So now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants after me, and that you will not destroy my name from my father's household." David swore to Saul, and Saul went to his home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So this is a good example of the guidance we get later from Jesus to love your enemy, and we can see the change in Saul's heart when David shows his enemy kindness. So this also alludes to the later teachings of Jesus, and it's something we need to pay attention to keep in mind. To turn somebody's heart, if you can be kind to them, even if they're not being kind to you, that is a way for peace, and it is something that God likes. It's a righteous way to be. So today I got a text message. I get about 2 quotes from the Bible every day from one friend, and it was a few verses. One quote, but a few verses. So the verse ended, it was Psalm 105, related to anointed ones, how self-existent one anoints, puts oil on the forehead. He decides who is to be the leader. So not the Pope, unless God anointed that person who is leading. So this Psalm 105, verse 5, it says, and it is coming from self-existent one talking. He says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm." So a lot of prophets did get killed, and even Jesus mentions that. So, prophets are anointed ones. So we just want to really take care if we can discern that somebody is in this category. So that's the end of chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, where David spared Saul's life the first time. And now here's a public service announcement. Stay tuned for the next lesson. I may summarize the next one some, but we'll read some of it. And now here's a brief public service announcement. In 2015 and 2018, I asked a listener of God who seems to me to have the anointing of God at that time, and the person is still alive, has been under lots of spiritual attacks, so pray for this person that gave me these messages. So I believe these messages are from Jehovah, or self-existent one, in the Old Testament, the Lord with capital letters. So I ask, what are the ecological priorities? And I ask this about a day before Earth Day, both years, in 2015 and 2018. In 2015, the message was a very heavy weight, he felt, and it was the South American rainforest, and to save species, and we also need the oxygen, and actually the whole thing is threatened with going away. So, and there was a solution which is called checkerboard development, where it's a 1-to-5 development ratio on a, for example, 6-acre unit of land. The middle acre humans would live on, and the surrounding 5 acres would be protected for the species. When you look into how many trees, illegal logging there's been, it was 2 million in one day in the South American rainforest, and that was in 2019. So it's really is really threatened. In 20 years, that could reach a tipping point and not create enough water to sustain the forest. And without that forest, it's going to dramatically affect weather, even in the U.S., and our oxygen levels. Okay, the other message was 2018, stop deadly methane at garbage dumps. We could incinerate our trash, and there are clean ways to incinerate and without the toxic fumes. So thanks for listening to those announcements, and help to further those if you feel moved. Okay, this is 1 Samuel chapter 25 from the BibleHub.com website. And also the Bible version is the NASB, which stands for New American Standard Bible, which is directly from Hebrew to English in the Old Testament, and then Greek to English in the New Testament, but it doesn't have the thous. It's more fluid reading for us. So the first subtitle is Samuel's Death. Then Samuel died, and all Israel gathered together and mourned for him, and buried him at his house in Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. We might notice that Samuel probably was allowed to live to a very old age because of his righteousness. So he was there to advise Saul, but he had retired from advising Saul in a way. So anyway, he died, and it's just something to note that now Saul for sure doesn't have a good connection to God. Well, actually his son Jonathan had a very good connection. So maybe he will rely on his son Jonathan. Nabal and Abigail. Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And it came about while he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the man's name was Nabal, Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. That David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him in my name." Paran is in the desert of Paran, is the Sinai Peninsula, or it's in the Sinai Peninsula, which the whole peninsula is a desert. So if we go to Britannica.com and we search Sinai Peninsula, it's spelled Sinai. Just above it is the area of the Holy Land. So, and this is also the area they mention where Ishmael and Hagar went. So that's another story. But BibleHub.com also has a map that shows where they think Paran is in the Sinai Peninsula. They mentioned Sin Desert, S-I-N desert. Interesting. So after Samuel died, David went down to Paran in the wilderness, and he had heard, in verse 4, David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel and visit Nabal and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say, have a long life, peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we have not insulted them, nor have they missed anything all the days they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you." When it says, "nor have they missed anything all the days," basically saying, my men have not stolen anything. They've been very noble around your people. And possibly even more likely, it could just mean that he didn't lose any of the livestock they were guarding, the sheep that they were guarding. They were just had extra help guarding the sheep, probably with David's men. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and to your son David." When David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in David's name. Then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David, and who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men whose origin I do not know?" So David's young men retraced their way and went back, and they came and told him according to all these words. David said to his men, "Each of you gird on his sword." So each man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword, and about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Behold, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he scorned them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we were not insulted, nor did we miss anything as long as we went about with them while we were in the fields. They were a wall to us both night and day, all the time we were with them, tending the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider what you should do, for evil is plotted against our master and against all his household, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him." The next subtitle is Abigail Intercedes, verse 18. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves of bread and 2 jugs, and wine, and 5 sheep already prepared, and 5 measures of roasted grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. She said to her young men, "Go on before me. Behold, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. It came about as she was riding on her donkey and coming down by the hidden part of the mountain, that behold, David and his men were coming down toward her, so she met them. Now David had said, "Surely in vain I have guarded all that this man has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him, and he has returned me evil for good. May God do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave as much as one male of any who belong to him." Verse 23. When Abigail saw David, she hurried and dismounted from the donkey, and fell on her face before David, and bowed herself to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my lord, be the blame, and please let your maidservant speak to you and listen to the words of your maidservant. Please do not let my lord pay attention to this worthless man, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent." Verse 26. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord lives, that's Lord with capital letters, and as your soul lives, since the Lord has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord be as Nabal. Verse 27. Now let this gift which your maidservant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who accompany my Lord. When she says Lord, she's saying in the interlinear version in the Hebrew, she's saying Adonai to David. She's calling David by the title Adonai, which also gets used for self-existent one. It's a very, not just high esteem, but it's a reverent title for him, a reverent greeting or acknowledgement. So she says, "Please forgive the transgression of your maidservant, for the Lord," in capital letters, "will certainly make for my Lord Adonai, David, an enduring house, because my Lord Adonai, David, is fighting the battles of the Lord," capital letters, self-existent one, the battles of the Lord, "and evil will not be found in you for all your days." I'm going to stop there